Hey guys, well it's Friday. Every Friday I try to post a video of some of the cars that I've done through the years. There's a few that I bought and I got rid of, some cars that I restored. So I want to show you a couple. Oh, and by the way, we got Scraps up and running. It runs pretty good. I'm really happy with the way it runs. So I'm going to start cramming on that tomorrow. I want to at least maybe bang out the driver's side quarter panel and that area right there, the outer wheelhouse. Things like that. But you know what? Today's Friday. Hope you had an awesome week. Take a look at some of the cars that I've done just through the years. It's only about 4 or 5. This one car right here was a car. A buddy of mine, he called me up. He's like, I had this car. I've been working on it for years. I'm not going to finish it. I'd like to just move it on down the road. I said, all right, I'll come and take a look at it. So take a look at it. Let me know what you think. Here we go. Yeah, you guessed it, a 69 Camaro. So it was actually a nice car. He bought the car, he started restoring the car, started going through it. He started on the body work, but it still needed to be blocked down, straightened out, a few dents fixed here and there, which I don't mind. That's the stuff I kind of like doing. So after I was done with the car, I sat back and I looked at it, and I'm like, I threw a vinyl top on it. It originally had a vinyl top on it, so I put a brand new vinyl top on the car. I went through the interior, I put a new carpet, a new headliner, dash pad, things like that. And I'm like, you know what, this is a perfect car to paint. So I sent it out to my buddy Joe, and I had him paint it dusk blue. And I was going to do the black stripe down the side, but I didn't. Before I had a chance to, a buddy of mine, as a gentleman, whenever I have a car, he's always trying to buy it. So he came across, that car, and he's like, listen, leave it the way it is, and I'll take the car the way it is. So we worked out a deal, and I'm like, all right, you can take the car, you can finish it, and do whatever you want to do with it. So it was nice. So it literally went from a friend of mine, sitting in his garage probably for about 10, 15 years, to where I got it, and it took me probably about 2 months to get it from the point of where it was when I picked it up to where I sold it to my other buddy. So, but that was a nice car. It was a 350 automatic, 10-bolt rear, just a nice cruiser. That, it was just a really nice driver, I guess. So that was a fun car. Here's another one. Did you ever, drive past somewhere and you're like, man, I didn't see that car sitting back over there? And then, I'm going to knock on the door, but you never do. And then time goes by and you drive past again and you're like, wow, that car is still there. So this is the story with this car. I drove past this place a few times through the years. And, it was actually a tow truck company. And in the front, there was a phone number. So I stopped, I knocked on the door, there was nobody there. So I called the number that was on the front door. And guy's name was, I think his name was Joe. So I'm talking to Joe, and I said, yeah, Joe, I saw you have a car sitting back here. Would you be interested in selling it? He's like, as a matter of fact, it is for sale. I'd like to get it out of there. I says, no kidding. He's like, are you there now? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I said, all right. I said, do you mind if I take a look at the car? And he's like, no, go right ahead. You can walk around back. It was like you could see it was just overgrown. So I went back over there. I went through the whole car. It was actually an old race car. And it had a motor and a tranny, and it had a 12-bolt rear in it. But it looks like it was sitting there for 30 years. So, but you know what? Take a look at it. Here we go. That was a 1968 Camaro. And the story with this, I'm looking at the car and I'm walking around it. Joe pulls up, really nice guy. And I said, Joe, what's the story with this car? He's like, Gal, the story is It was at the time my girlfriend's father's car. He used to drag race the car, and he stopped drag racing it, and he needed a place to store it. So I let him store it back here in the yard about 20 years ago. I said, no kidding. He's like, yeah, and then in that 20 years, he had passed away. At the time, my girlfriend, I married her now, it was his wife, and my wife never wanted to get rid of the car. I said, okay. He's like, so it sat and sat and sat. That car sat so long that the hood started to delaminate to where you could peel it open like a tuna can. It was crazy. But, the bones were good. The frame rails were good. The rockers were good in the car. It was good in the right places. So, we worked out a deal. He's like, I said, we worked out a price. And he's like, Al? He's like, how far do you live? I said, I live like 10 minutes down the road. He's like, you know what? I'll just have my driver pick up the car, drag it out of here, and we'll put it on the back of the flatbed, and we'll take it right to your house. I said, great. So paid him when he dropped the car off. So he pulled up in front. I said, can you spin it around and drop it in front so I can back my trailer to it and then just pull it back up? He's like, sure. So we pulled it off of his flatbed. We got it onto my trailer. I bring the car. I bring it to my garage. I leave it on the trailer. And while it was sitting, I didn't even touch the car. While it was sitting there, somebody stopped by and he's like, hey, would you be interested in selling that? I said, yeah. As a matter of fact, the car was going to go for sale. I was going to work on the car and get rid of it. He's like, no, I'll take the car exactly how it is. How much you want for it? So I gave him a number. He was super happy with it. And I literally went from my driveway to that gentleman's driveway, and I offloaded the car right there. I don't think I had the car 24 hours. It was crazy. But I was looking to build it, not as to make it mint, but just to make it kind of cool, like an old-fashioned hot rod type of thing. And I didn't even get a chance to do it. So that that was just kind of a cool little find, So if you ever see a car that's sitting, knock on the door. You never know. Sometimes I can't tell you how many cars I bought like that. So that was pretty cool. Now here's another story I got to tell you. There I was having my cup of coffee, and I was looking for a set of SS mags, like 1970 Chevelle SS mags, 69 Camaros had them. So I was looking for a set, and there I was online, I was looking, and I came across a set of SS mags. It was about 30 minutes away, 25, 30 minutes away. So I get a hold of the gentleman, and I said, listen, I'd like to buy the wheels and tires. He's like, sure. He's like, come over whenever you want to come over. I said, I can come over now if that's okay. He's like, sure, come on over. Really, really nice guy. So I go there, and it's always being at the right place at the right time. So I go over there, I look at the wheels and tires, and they were mint. So I said, I really like these wheels and tires. He's like, yeah, I took them off my car because I wanted to go with a set of 15-inch SS mags. I said, no kidding. He's like, yeah. I go, what kind of car was it? He says it was a 1970 Chevelle Super Sport, big block stick. He's like, it was a 572 cubic inch big block, something crazy with a 5-speed. It was all, suspension was done. And he's telling me about the car. I said, no kidding, whatever happened to it? He's like, oh no, it's still here. I go, no kidding. He's like, yeah, I'm looking to sell it. It's like, really? He's like, yeah, I'm moving out of state. So, I'd like to get rid of it within the next couple of weeks if I can. I said, would you mind if I take a look at it? He's like, come on over, I'll open up the garage door. So he opens up the garage door, and this is what I find. Here we go. So he opens the door, and this is what I see. I was like, wow. He's like, yeah, I don't really drive the car that much anymore because he had developed, I believe, MS, and he was leaving Long Island to move down by family out of state. He's like, I can't even drive the car, to be honest with you. And his name was Tony, actually. So I'm talking to Tony. I said, Tony, what do you want to do with the car? He's like, I just like to get rid of it. You know, I've had the car for years. He had a stack of receipts about that thick on all the work that he had done on the car. He's like, you know, I'd like to get rid of it. You know, I just can't take it with me, and I just don't really have any interest in the car anymore. And I said, okay. So we worked out a deal, and I said, listen, I'll come back tomorrow if it's okay, and I'll pick it up. He's like, sure, you know what I'll do? He's like, I got a bunch of extra parts, things like that. I'll get it all together for you. So the next day, I'm going to start driving over to Tony's house. My brother stops by, and I told him what I'm looking at, and he's like, oh, can I take a ride with you? I said, sure, come on, let's go. So we take a ride out to Tony's, and he opens up the garage door, and my brother's a big Chevelle guy. He loves 7 Chevelles. He opens up the garage door, and my brother looks at me, he's like, man, I love that car. I'm like, yeah, I had a feeling you'd love this car. It's gorgeous. I couldn't find a nick, a scratch, or a ding on that car. I couldn't believe how straight it was and how nice the paint was. So, you know, we take the car out, we start it up, it sounded beautiful, and I loaded it onto my trailer. So we're driving home, and my brother looks at me and he's like, you know, I'd really like to buy that car. I said, you know what, if you want the car, take it. You saw what I paid for it, take it. The car is yours. You know, have some fun with it. So I had no intentions of buying a car, I just needed wheels and tires. So my brother ends up buying the car. My brother ends up buying the car. I take it straight to my brother's house. And my brother has beautiful cars. And I'll show you one day. I'll do a YouTube video on some of the cars he's got. He's got really some beautiful cars. And so I dropped the car right off to him. And, you know, he drove that car for years. He just sold that car, I think. He just sold it the end of last year. He sold it, no, he's probably about 7 months ago he sold that car. Beautiful car. And he bought himself now, he's got a gorgeous 1970 Nova Super Sport, big black stick, triple black. You know, it's everything my brother owns. He's like, he takes such good care of it, and it's like perfect. It's amazing. So that was just one crazy being at the right place at the right time. I was looking for a set of wheels and tires, and ended up buying a car that the wheels and tires came off of. They weren't original to the car. If they were original to the car, they were date coded, then I would put those back on the car, and I would have taken the 15s. But they weren't, and the car looked good with the 15s on it. So my brother's like, nah, forget it, I'll just leave the 15s on there. And I'm like, all right, fine. So that was an interesting story with that Chevelle. And I have another really good story about another Chevelle I'm going to tell you at the end of this video. So, like I say, I'll get up, I'll have my cup of coffee, and I'll see what's out there. I stumbled across this one car, and the cars that I like to find are the ones that people just give up on. They're not going to put it together, they're just sitting, and they're not going to do anything with them. Those are the cars that I like to find. So there I was, have my cup of coffee, I come across this, and as a matter of fact, the gentleman's name, I believe it's Paul. So, and it wasn't far, he was probably about 2 hours away. So Paul gives me his address, I drive out to his house. So I meet Paul and his father, and I can't remember his father's name. Super nice guy. So I'm looking at this car, and I see he had his garage door open, and I see something in the garage. I go, oh, what's that over there? He's like, oh, it's a 1968 Nova. I'm like, no kidding. He's like, yeah, me and my father were going to put that car together, so we figured we'll get rid of this car. And you know what? Before I get more into the story, take a look at the car that I went to go get. Here we go. That was a 1967 Camaro. It needed everything. It needed floors, needed a trunk, needed quarter panels, but it came with all the parts, which was good. It didn't have the front suspension on it. It needed that, so I had to put a front suspension on the car. And I got the whole car back together. But the story with that was, the gentleman's name was Paul, lives in New Jersey. And I just stumbled across, it's online now, I believe it's on Facebook, that 68 Nova that I saw in the garage. So I shouldn't say I just stumbled across it. Probably about 2 months ago I stumbled across it. So I touched base with him, and I said, Paul, I thought you weren't going to sell the car. He's like, well, my father passed away, and I just don't have any desire to put the car together. And I was like, wow, it's a shame. It's like, yeah, he's like, I got all the panels for it and everything. I just don't have the desire or anything to do. I said, okay. So I didn't want to make him an offer. Let him see if he can get as much money as he could for the car. The car's still for sale right now, and I'll probably reach out to him soon, I guess, if he still has it. And that might be like a spring project or something like that. So we'll see what happens. But it was just interesting. I put that Camaro together. I didn't make that car driver. I just cleaned up. I put the interior in it. And I just got it to the point to where somebody else, if they want to prime it, because I didn't prime the car either. I'm like, if they want to prime it or paint it, the body wasn't dead. And then, they could kind of get, I tried to get the car to the next level to where somebody else can say, hey, I could throw a motor and tranny in it. And then they can get it, as a driver and just have some fun with it. So, those are the cars that I like to find. I like to find the cars that have been abandoned. Nobody wants any part of it. And, just give it a second chance on life. So now here's another story. There I was, having my cup of coffee. I come across this car. I was like, wow. It was 15 minutes away. So I'm looking at the car, and I'm like, man, I wonder if that's car. In the ad, it said 1969 Camaro Z28. Been sitting for 30 plus years. It's like, oh boy. So I reach out to him. He didn't have any photos, so I reach out to him. I said, do you have any photos of the car or anything? So he sends me a couple of photos. I said, do you mind if I run over there now and take a look at it? He's like, come on over. It's in the back of his, he owned some business, and that's, he owned the house, and he had the lot in the back. He says, come on over, but we're going to have to drag the cover off it and everything. So, it might take a little bit. I said, okay, great. So take a look at this car. I thought this was a cool little find, something that was completely forgotten about. Take a look at this. That was a 1969 Z28 X77. It was a real Z28. It had a 302 in it with a 4-speed. It had a 10-bolt rear in it. But he said somewhere that he had the 12-bolt rear somewhere. He said, that car said, he said it was sitting there over 30 years. It was sitting. It took us probably 20 minutes just to get everything off the car and get the cover off the car. So I'm looking at the car, and I was like, wow, I couldn't believe how clean the frame rails were. The floors needed a little bit of work, but they weren't terrible. The same with the trunk, needed a little bit of work. It wasn't terrible. So I work out a deal with the guy, and I load the car onto my trailer. So as I'm driving home, I call Mr. Wilson. I said, Mr. Wilson, listen, I got this car. And I told him everything about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the car home, and I'm going to change all the panels that I need to be. I got to change the quarters because the quarter panels had those flares on them and stuff. It was done a long time ago. In spite of how horrible the car looked, it was really solid. So I bring the car home. I call my parts guy. I said, listen, I need quarter panels. I need floor pans, everything. He's like, I'll have everything in stock. I'll drop it off to your house. I said, okay, great. So I picked the car up earlier that day. And this is all the work as far as I did the quarter panels that day. I did the floors that day. I threw a set of wheels and tires on the car. And I take the car right out to Mr. Wilson. And Mr. Wilson yanks the nose off the car, and he actually got the car running. I couldn't believe it. So, that wasn't a car. That car just went into primer, and it was sold as a running car, but you couldn't drive it. It didn't have brakes or anything. But it was literally a car that sat for over 30 years that within 2 weeks, was ready to be sold to somebody if they wanted to do the brakes in the car and everything. They could actually drive the car. So those are the cars that I like to find. I like to find the cars that are just buried and forgotten about. And, you know, like I say, you've seen cars. We can make cars really mint if we want to, but it's just, it eliminates so many, you know, people that, you know, because I can't afford a car like that that's done. So, and this is the only way I guess I can afford a car like that, if I buy it and do it myself. And I'm fine with that, I really am. But I kind of enjoy building them more than I enjoy keeping them, I guess. So if I keep it, I can't go on to the next project and build another one. So that was a fast little build, a car, just like I say, sitting and have my cup of coffee, and I stumbled across a 1969 Z28. I couldn't believe it. So like I say, a lot of times it's being at the right place at the right time. So now I'm going to tell you another story about another 69 Z28. And this is, there's a little more to it, you know, like, you know, I was sitting one day and I wasn't looking. My phone rings. He said, Al, a friend of mine's got a car. He's looking to sell it. He owns a construction company. It's sitting in one of his bays on a 4-post car lift. He's like, you know, it's just taking up room. It was an ex-race car. They had put new quarter panels on the car. They put new floor pans in it. It just needed to be finished. It had a 302 in it with a cross ram set up, but it was an aftermarket cross ram on the car. So, you know, so I called Mr. Wilson. Said, you know, Mr. Wilson, you want to take a ride with me? The car's about 20 minutes from my house. It was in the North Shore. He's like, sure, I'll be at your house. You know, he's like, when do you want to go look at it? I said, well, my daughter's car was hit, so I had to drop it off at the body shop to have them fix it. So, you know, I'll call you as soon as I went to Avis. So I said, as soon as I leave Avis, I'll call you and I'll let you know, and then you can meet me at my house, and then we'll go take a look at that car. He said, okay, fine. So here's an interesting story. So I go to Avis, and my daughter had a Jeep Liberty. It was sitting in the front, dropped it off. So they kind of give you the car that's compatible to what you had. So I'm walking through the parking lot, and I see another Jeep Liberty. I see a Toyota Camry, a Honda Accord, and in the corner, I see a Hemi Charger. It's like, oh, that's the car I want to get. So I walk inside, and I'm speaking to the gentleman. He's like, you know, Al, he's like, we have this Honda Accord. I said, no, it's too small. He's like, we got a Jeep Liberty. I go, nah, too small. I go, you have anything else, maybe a 4-door that's a little bit bigger? He's like, well, we have this Charger. It's got a Hemi in it. So me, you know, you never let anybody know what you know. I said, what's a Hemi? He says, well, you know what? It makes a lot of power, and it's not that great on gas. I said, it's okay. You know what? I'm going to only do local driving anyway. He says, all right. So I end up getting the Charger with the Hemi in it. He's like, Al, the car will be ready for you in about 10 minutes. We'll just have the guy out there clean it up, make sure everything's good, you know, fill up, you know, make sure it's got a full tank of gas in it. I said, okay, great. So I fill out all the paperwork. I walk out the back door, and there's the Hemi Charger sitting right there. And the guy just finishes cleaning it, and he's like, he hands you the keys, I guess. And he's like, listen, be careful with this car. Don't be taking it to any drag strips or anything. I go, what do you mean taking it to any drag strips? He's like, yeah, this car's got a Hemi in it. I go, really? He's like, yeah. I go, how is it on gas? He's like, it's not that great. I said, okay, fine. Thank you very much. So the way that the Avis building was sitting, it was a side street and it was a main road. So I pull out of the side street, I make a right on the main road, and just past the building, I stopped at a red light. So when you got a Charger with a Hemi in it, what do? You take the traction control off and you put it in performance mode. I smoked the tires through first, second, and third gear down the block, and I know they heard it. So I end up driving the car home, and I meet Mr. Wilson at my house. Mr. Wilson's like, Hemi Charger? He's like, that's not you, Al. You know, you're not a Chrysler guy. I go, listen, I love anything with a Hemi in it. So he gets in the car. We start driving. We come up to a light. I turn to Mr. Wilson. I said, hang on. He's like, what do you mean? I turn the traction control off. I put it into performance mode. We had that car going sideways through first, second, and third gear. He looked at me. He's like, wow, these cars really do make a lot of power. I go, yeah, that's so much fun to drive. I went through a full tank of gas in that car in one day. That's how much fun I had with that car. I Dukes of Hazzard that car. It was a ball. I had a great time with that car. So if you guys ever want to have a good time, go rent one of those cars. They're a ball. They're a lot of fun. So anyway, let's move on. So I end up driving to this gentleman's, I think, I can't remember. I think his name was, it might have been Vinny. His name was Vinny. So we pull up. It was a construction site. Vinny comes out. He's like, "Hey Al, how you doing?" He's like, "Listen, go to the last bay on the left." There was like 7 bays. So we go to the last bay on the left. He opens up the garage door. It's a 1969 Z28 sitting on a 4-post car lift. So we're looking. Mr. Wilson looks at me. He's like, "Man, I'd love to have that car lift." I said, "All right, let me see what I could do." So I talked to Vinny, and Vinny's like, "Yeah, it's just taking up a lot of room. It's an X-Race car. It's got a 302 in it." And I'm like, "Oh, really? It's original?" He's like, "No, it's not original to the car. It's got a cross ram set up, but it's not an original cross ram. It's a replica of the cross ram. It was a 4-speed with a 12-bolt in it, and it was gutted inside. It was not, but it was all new." So I end up working a deal with him where I bought the car and the lift. As a matter of fact, that's the lift that's in Mr. Wilson's back garage right now. So we work out a deal. So the next day, I bring my car trailer. We load the Z28 onto my trailer with a ton of parts. We take apart the 4-post lift. Mr. Wilson goes there with his trailer, and we load the lift on his trailer. He takes the trailer out to his house with the lift on it, and I go to my house with the Z28. So I'm going through the car. I was just putting some things together and everything. So, Mr. Wilson, he put the lift together that next day. And he's like, "How you making out with the Z28? I said, "The car needed very little work." I said, "All the panels are straight. They did a nice job, whoever did the work on the car. So it just needed to be put back together." I said, "I don't know if it's, the motor looked complete." So Mr. Wilson's like, "Bring it out to me." He's like, "I'll yank the motor out of that car. I'll go through the whole thing. I'll go through it in the car. If I feel I got to take it out, I'll take it out." To make a long story short, I bring the car to Mr. Wilson. He yanks the nose off the car. He takes the motor out. It ends up the heads weren't bolted down all the way. They weren't torqued down. They were just snug or whatever. So he ended up putting new head gaskets on the car. We ordered everything. I ordered new carburetors for the car. I wanted it to look correct. And no better person than Mr. Wilson to make something look like that's how it came from the factory. He's very knowledgeable, Mr. Wilson. And he's also, I love working with Mr. Wilson. We do a lot of projects together. As a matter of fact, we're going to be doing a project together in the next couple of weeks on a 68 Camaro. It's going to need we're going to do a vinyl top. We're going to do a headliner in the car. And he's been doing some work on the car. It was the same gentleman that owned that 1940 business car that we worked on a few weeks ago. So anyway, he takes the motor out. So while the motor's out, we put the nose back on the car, get everything lined up. I drop it off to the body shop. I had the car painted and back. I think it took Joe probably about 2 weeks to do this car. He got the car done right away. He added the deck stripes to the car, and it was just a pretty car. Take a look at this car, and then I'll explain the rest of the car to you, okay? Let's have a look. That car came out really pretty. It worked out. Everything was just all in the timing. That car went together. So I don't think that car took about, oh my gosh, maybe about 7 weeks. I think that car went from when you first saw it to where it's finished. Maybe about 8 weeks, probably about 2 months. But it just worked out great because from Mr. Wilson, It went right to the body shop. And while I was at the body shop, we gathered all the parts for it. Mr. Wilson went through the motor. We got the car back, swung the motor in the car and everything, and Mr. Wilson finished it. Mr. Wilson did a lot of work on that car. He did a beautiful job on that car. As a matter of fact, the dealership bought that car, and it went out of state. And that was just a pretty car. It was a lot of fun. But I tend to not look for Z28s because I love them. I really do. But a Z28, you have to do it correctly, in my opinion. You know, if you don't do it correctly, you know, it won't, I guess, maybe pull the value that you think it should pull for it being a Z28. That's why with the other Z28, that car just went in primer and it was sold to somebody to where all they have to do is the brakes and everything like that, and they can make it affordable. So that was an affordable Z28. So I went from one end of the spectrum to an affordable one to the other end of the spectrum to where it was almost a Barrett Jackson build. You know, and those are the cars that I don't like to do. In spite of how fast we can get those cars put together, I just enjoy the other cars that, like the rest of, like all of us, you know, the cars that we can, you know, that we can all enjoy and have fun with. You know, I'm not that high-end guy, and you know, and I'm not knocking any high-end guys. You know, it's like, God bless you, but I'm just the average guy, and that was kind of that was a neat build, and I just out of the blue, my buddy calling me up. From the time my buddy called me up to the time that car was done was a little over 8 weeks. So in a short period of time, that car went from sitting in a construction site garage to a dealership to where somebody else bought the car and now they were enjoying the car. So that was pretty neat. There's something else I want to show you now. The one car that I sold that I wish I still had till this day, and the interesting thing was, I came across this car. It was online, and it wasn't far. It was in Staten Island, and you know, Staten Island from Long Island, it's mile wise, it's maybe 25 miles, but it could take you 2 hours to get there. Sometimes it's terrible. So, you know, I wasn't gonna go look at it, but I saw this car, and I'm like, wow, that car looks all original. It had the original hubcaps on it and everything. So I get a hold of the gentleman, and I'll never forget his name. He was a really nice guy. At the time, he was about 70 years old, and just a nice guy. So I go out there, and I'll never forget his name, Mr. Ciani. And the stories that he told me with that car, he's like, you know, Al, he's like, my mother bought this car brand new. Like, no kidding. He's like, yep, she bought it brand new, and she legitimately drove that car back and forth to church and to the grocery store. The car had 14,000 original miles on it. I have to show you this car, then I'll go over it, okay? Let's have a look. That was a 1969 Malibu. It had a 307 with air conditioning, and it worked. It had 14,000 original miles. When I got the car, it still had the original hubcaps on it. The first day I brought the car home, I threw the rallies on it. I was speaking to Mr. Ciani, and just a really nice guy. I can't say enough nice things about him. And he's like, you know, Al, he's like, I remember. She's like, you know, my mother would drive this car back and forth to church, and she would drive it to the grocery store. My mother passed away, and the car sat in the garage. He's like, I always took care of it. You know, I rolled down the windows. Every now and then I'd pull the car out, I'd wash it, I'd put it back in. So he really just had a passion for the car. He loved the car, and I could completely understand. So I looked at the car, and we worked out a deal, and I bought the car from him. And he's like, you know, just please take care of the car. And I said, I will 100% take care of this car. I drove that car around for a few years, and when I went to go sell it, my brother looked at me. He's like, you know, you're never going to find another car like this again. I said, I know, you know. I said, you know, but, you know, like I say, you know, a lot of these cars, I can't afford to keep them if I want to keep doing what I enjoy doing. So, that, like I said, that car had 14,000 original miles. I've driven a lot of restored cars, beautifully restored cars, but you'll never drive those restored cars. They'll drive beautiful, but it won't drive like a 14,000 original mile unmolested car. That car was incredible. I love that car. It drove like a Cadillac and everything worked in it. That's the one car that I wish I still had till this day. I love that car. Because I'm not just a Camaro guy. I love first-gen Camaros, but I also love Chevelles. I love Novas. You know, I like a lot of different types of Fords and Chryslers and things like that. But that was the one car that I wish I never sold. So I just wanted to share that story with you. Mr. Ciani, I'll never forget him. He was such a nice guy. So I'm going to show you something else too. Because a lot of you guys are like, Al, that guy on, the guy on YouTube that, crawls underneath cars and he gets filthy. So you guys really don't know me. One day I'm going to sit down, if you guys want, I'm going to sit down with Mr. Wilson and we're just going to hang out. And, I guess a podcast, whatever they call it, whatever, however you want to do it. And you'll kind of get to know who I am and who Mr. Wilson is and how we kind of got together into putting cars together and things like that. But this last video that I want to show you, this last picture, was a picture of me in high school with my 1969 Camaro. And I still have this car today. So I'm going to show you a picture of me in high school. I graduated back in the mid-'80s, to this other picture that I'm going to show you, which was about 4 years ago. Okay, and it's in the picture in the same place at my high school. Take a look. I know the first words that came to your mind. Hey, Al's not wearing a hat. I'm just a hat guy. I like wearing hats, especially when I'm working on the car. When you get enough things that fall in your hair and you're welding and things like that, the hat generally stops some of that, from happening. So you'll always see me wearing a hat when I'm working on the car, or I'll wear some type of winter hat or something like that. So that was a picture of me back in high school, and a picture of me probably about 4 years ago. I just wanted to share that with you. And I just wanted to share some of these other cars, in this video. And I have a lot more. I have another, next week I'm going to show you. The problem is I lost a lot of my pictures, and I'm trying to piece them together. I'm going to show you next week a beautiful 68 Rally Sport that Mr. Wilson and I put together. And, and a few other cars too. But, I try every Friday just to take, to me it's like a timeout, I sit back and, I'll post a video of just some of the cars done through the years. And I hope you enjoy it. So next week, hopefully I'll have another video and, with some other cars. And let me know what you think about me and Mr. Wilson, maybe just getting together and, how this whole thing started. Okay, let me know what you think of that. But like I say all the time, enough babbling. I appreciate you guys watching, and you guys take care of yourselves. And have an awesome weekend.